Hey, it's Faith Talk Live. I'm Rick Probst.
And I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
Hey, we're pretty pumped about talking to this guy. He's got a great book out. It's Pastor Mark Clark. He's the founding pastor of Village Church, a multi-site church in multi-cities across Canada. We want to talk about the problem of Jesus, answering a skeptic's challenges to the scandal of Jesus, that book. But also, I'm so excited, and Dan and I are excited because he's Canadian. And what is it? Mark, first of all, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing very well, sir. How are you guys? Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Great.
Absolutely. Okay, this is an American talking. How come we think Canadians are so cool? I want to be a Canadian.
I don't know. We're at least a generation ahead of you guys in regard to a few things, but I'm not sure those things are things that you would value. So.
Well, we think you guys are cool, and we love what you're doing. And I'm sure that you've heard many say, "Hey, good day, A," and you just snicker and say,
"Oh yeah," because that's definitely how we all talk.
Yeah.
we live in igloos. We crawl out once in a while to figure out what the Americans are doing, and then we go, "Okay, thank you," and then we go back in our igloos. So
yeah, you're super nice. It's what everybody says. Canadians are so.
It
nice.
is. Yeah, we are super nice. That is very true.
Let's get down to business. I love. In fact, I talked to the publicist this morning. She's going to send me a copy of the book. I have just a portion of it here on my computer, but I'm pretty excited about reading it. Actually, The Problem of Jesus: Answering a Skeptic's Challenges to the Scandal of Jesus. Let's talk about this. The culture has gotten so skeptical, and look at all the mess we've just gone through. Right, our political challenges. We've got, just crazy stuff going on. We've got racial challenges going on. We've got the pandemic. And, what I see in conversation is people are getting more skeptical.
Yeah.
And I got to say that they're throwing, religion, Christianity into that whole mix. Would you say the same?
Yeah, I mean, we see it in Canada, like I alluded to before, maybe a generation ahead of the U.S. in regard to secularization, the movement toward kind of an anti-religious mindset and posture as a culture. And so when I speak in the U.S., I usually say, I come to you from the future. This is where you're going, and the future is, it's both scary, but it's also there is some hope in it, because what it does, and this is kind of what I talk about in the book, is that you have a generation of people who are rejecting Christianity based on stuff that Jesus wasn't really about. And so if you have people saying, I don't want to be involved in the church, or I don't want to become a Christian, and the follow-up needs to sometimes be, okay, but why? And a lot of their reasons are the hypocrisy of the church, or the way that Christians have fumbled trying to follow the Jesus so we need to clear away some of that and go, who was Jesus? And then let your life be scandalized by that, and reject or embrace Christianity based on who Jesus was versus, the bad cultural versions of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's so good.
I love that, because we, as humans, obviously sinful humans, we tend to mess things up quite a bit. And so we are not what Jesus was, and what God intended for people who don't know Jesus to see. And so that's a great way to look at it. So what made you go, man, I need to write this book?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a skeptical situation as a home. There was no church, no Bible, no prayer, no God. My dad was such an ardent atheist. He told my mom that she couldn't spell my brother's name, which is Matthew, with 2 T's, because that would be biblical. Wow. So they named him Matthew, spelt his name with 1 T, and then 4 years later had me and named me Mark. So clearly this guy didn't have a clue what was going on. The trajectory of this thing was not going well for him. But yeah, no Bible, no church, no nothing. Walked into a church the first time when I was 19. So I've always kind of had that skeptical spirit. And so this book, I met Jesus, when I was like 18, and had this amazing encounter. 2 years later, started going to church. People came around me, said, you should go into ministry. Anyway, long story about how I, became a pastor and kind of an academic passion at this. But really, I wanted to write a book to say, okay, 20 years I've been thinking about Jesus. How do I write for the skeptic and for the believer? How do I write a book about Jesus that captures both of those worlds, convinces the skeptic and inspires the believer? And so that's what this is. And so, I started a church 11 years ago now with exactly that passion as well. 16 people in my house got together and we said, how can we reach people for Jesus? And so we just started, you were talking earlier about how nice Canadians are. When we started our church, everyone was like, here's the kind of church you got to start. You got to get up, you got to say, hey, everybody, I'm sorry. You're a good person. I'm glad you're here. Pear-shaped tones, tell everybody that they're a good person. And I was like, well, that sucks. That sounds boring. So I just started preaching verse by verse through the Bible, telling everybody they're a disaster and they're sinful, but Jesus is the hero of their life. And the one common denominator about all the disasters of their life is them. And they got to repent and give their life to Jesus. And what happened is these nice Canadians showed up. They went, oh my goodness, the gospel's offensive. I'm going to go get my friend. And they would go get, and then they would show up. Yeah. And they would show up and get their life changed and their marriage changed. And they get all of this crazy stuff. And so we started to grow and grow and grow and grow. And wow, the rest is history over the course of 10 or 11 years. It's been amazing to see. Point being, the scandalous reality of Jesus actually still works. And we do a lot of, dog and pony show to try to convince people that Jesus is interesting and compelling. And what I'm trying to talk about in this book is you don't need to. You just look at the real Jesus, and the stuff he's doing is unbelievable, insane.
Love that. Pastor Mark Clark, founding pastor of Village Church. We're talking about the book. It's called The Problem of Jesus, Answering a Skeptic's Challenges to the Scandal of Jesus. I love that, Mark. I think we're hearing that and seeing that more and more here. We're talking to pastors and they've basically had enough. And, the congregation going, okay, what else do you have? That's because they've been fed this type of entertainment.
Sure.
And, hey, I like, great music and flashy lights, like the next guy, but the messages have been so watered down. It's like, but yeah, you're right. You're going back to the gospel, and it's a little scary and it's kind of refreshing at the same time. What do you think?
Yeah. I one of the chapters I talk about discipleship and, couple of the idols of that Jesus puts his finger on in his ministry are family and comfort. Luke chapter 9, the guy's like, hey, I'll follow you, but I got to go, bury my dad first. And he's like, yeah, you don't get this. And in a Middle Eastern culture, that would have been scandalous to the core. But, sometimes the people who love us the most can be the people who make us so that we can't hear God anymore. I know people in our church that are like, I felt called to go to sell. My kids were in school. I'm going to sell my house. I'm going to go to, wherever it is and help out some people for 6 months. And a guy in his family actually did that. And everyone around them, how do you think they reacted? It was like, this isn't wise. This is dumb. You're set. We have this brand, and I'm not saying that's everyone's story. I'm just saying we have this brand of Christianity that is kind of this suburban, safe world where, this is the goal of life. And Jesus, just go read Jesus. When he talks about, 269 times in the Gospels, the word disciple is used. 3 times the word Christian is used in the New Testament. The paradigm for Christianity is discipleship, which means there's no version in the New Testament where we go, basically I have some different doctrines about the divinity of Christ in my life, but I watch Netflix, spend my money, do my sex life, do my family life, all the same as every one of my neighbors. That isn't the New Testament model. And so Jesus upends all this and challenges both religious people and non-religious people to say, are you actually making me the core of your life, or are you just kind of creating a Christianized version of what you already are and what you're determined to remain?
Talking to Mark Clark now. Mark, I'm going to assume, and this might be a softball, but I'm going to assume as you were preparing the book, doing the research and everything, it probably grew your faith even more, or did it not? Probably.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, I wanted to try to, deal with questions like the historical Jesus, for instance, right? There's people all over kind of the Western world right now saying, well, Jesus didn't even exist. And I'm like, okay, how do I resource the church to help them answer that question? Yeah. So, the first chapter kind of gets that out of the way with citing people who weren't even in the Bible, people writing in the first century, who were enemies of Christianity, or at least not friends of it, who actually mentioned Jesus by name and mention a series of things about him that even if we didn't have the New Testament, there would be this fascinating collection of facts about him.
Right.
And so I talk about that, and I kind of bring in the scholarship and say, what did conservative and liberal scholars agree on in regard to the historicity of Jesus? And then I move to the Gospels. Are these things trusted? Me as a skeptic, coming in to Christianity, I was like, I would read parables, for instance, and I'd be like, well, if in Luke's gospel, he says it this way, but in Matthew's gospel, he says it this way. There's 4 birds and not 2, whatever. And then I'd go, and then I'd say, okay, well, that's it. The gospels are all made up.
Yeah.
And kind of walk away from it. But then you start actually, and what I talk about in the book, what kind of gave me faith in this is like, you start reading the scholarship, and they point something out that's fascinating, that Jesus probably gave these same sermons 250 times. He did ministry for 3 years, and he would walk around these different villages and tell these stories, and he would adapt them. And so Matthew's telling the one he did in April, and Luke's telling the one he did in December, and a totally different village. And it's okay. Everyone calm down. This isn't a discrepancy. This isn't throw your Bible out now, So those kind of things, when you start to research those and present them to help other people, you realize, oh, okay, my faith is actually growing deeper in the legitimacy of the Gospels and Jesus himself.
Mark Clark, Pastor Mark, talking about the problem of Jesus, answering a skeptic's challenge to the scandal of Jesus. This is twofold. You're challenging the Christian, and you're answering the questions to skeptics. What have you seen? People reading the book, hearing the messages, because that's been your message for since the beginning, right? What have you seen as far as, I know you talk about dealing with religious people. You've seen them probably get mad. Have you seen them turn the corner?
Yeah, we see them turn the corner. I mean, you don't grow, even though it is the greater Vancouver area, the church doesn't grow with just straight up pagans that fast. What you see are, post-Christian or people who went to church, de-churched people who walked away from the church 10 years ago and said, I grew up in this thing and I'm fed up with it, whatever. What starts to happen is when they start to get clarity on the gospel and it starts to drop in their life, they come back and then they start bringing people who don't know Jesus. And so I've seen people who were sitting in church for 20 years and they kind of walked away from it, and then they show up and they hear it and they see it, and it feels like it's for the first time, and then they start being a missionary for the first time in their life. Then they start actually going, oh my gosh, my affections are being changed toward Jesus. Now I got to go love my neighbor for the first time ever. Before it was just sit in a pew, give my tithe, go home. And now they're like, my gosh, how do I live this thing? And they're animated and they're jacked up. And then they start bringing their non-Christian friends. So we've seen that happen too. But of course, one of the core scandals of Jesus, I talk about this in the chapter on parables, the prodigal son story, where it's a terrible name because what the preacher usually does is say, hey, look, there's this young son who takes all his dad's money, goes and sleeps with prostitutes, comes to the end of himself, runs back home. And the father runs out, throws his robe on him, throws a party, and everyone's happy, and the sermon ends. But the problem is there's another brother in that story. He's the religious brother who has done everything his father told him to do his whole life. He said, I obeyed you. I've done everything you want. And at the end of that story, the scandal is he's the one left outside of the kingdom. He never comes into the party. So Jesus is constantly going, religious people can be just as lost as pagans. Because their question is not, does God exist? It's, I don't care that he does. Wow. He's not integrated in my life. I'm not going to bring him into my money life and my sex life and my family life. I'm not going to integrate the Father. I'm going to walk up to the Father and say, I was so good, you should let me into heaven. That's religion. And of course, the younger brother goes, I'm so bad, I need your righteousness. And he gets the robe. That would have been the Father's own robe. So at the end of the day, I talk about that on Judgment Day, there's going to be two options. You're going to stand before Jesus and you're going to say, I want to base my judgment on my record. Your other option is, I want to base my judgment on your record. And I find hope in the last one, not the first one, because I'm a wreck.
Yeah.
That's so good. Pastor Mark is founding pastor of Village Church, multi-site church in multi-cities across Canada. The new book is The Problem of Jesus, Answering the Skeptic's Challenge to the Scandal of Jesus. Mark, this is fascinating. We would love to catch up with you again. We want people to read the book. Dan has put the Instagram there and the Facebook as well. No doubt they can get, there it is. There's the website, theproblemofgod.com. I'm sure they can get the book Amazon and get there at the website. What do you have coming up for the rest of 2021? What's going on with you?
Well, we're trying to open. I mean, we have a bunch of rental properties. We don't own a property as a church. And so we're thousands of people stretched across all these sites that are all rental. And we have been shut down. We have not been able to physically gather as a church since March of last year. So we've been online. And so it's just a matter of, hey, let's lean in and try to reach as many people as possible online until we can gather again. But we are, we're not like you guys, man. We're locked down. You know, you guys love to go like, you're not going to lock me down. I got rights.
System here, man.
Like, no. The man can shove it. And Canadians are like, Canadians are like, okay, we'll sit in our house. You tell us when we can come out, The collective is more important than the individual.
That's so funny.
We are. I mean, we're getting pretty, we're getting pretty frustrated, as well with certain things. I mean, we understand it on the one hand, and you got to love neighbor and all the rest, but it's frustrating when you see, some of the youth stuff and the addiction stuff and the isolation. I got a 99, believe it or not, a 99-year-old grandfather. And the guy's 4 years older than Anne Frank. That's what dawned on me the other day. Okay. So, I mean, think about that.
Yeah.
He was 40 when Martin Luther King Jr. got shot. I mean, he's my age anyway, it just blows my mind. Anyways, so he is in a home just sitting there for a year. My mom can't visit. I mean, this is sad. So anyway, Canadians are also quite frustrated and trying to figure out what to do. And how do you remain faithful to Jesus in the midst of the empires that we live in? All of that tension.
Start an uprising, Mark. That's what I say.
A Canadian uprising, which is like, hey, so can we? No? Okay, we'll go. We'll just go back home. Yeah.
Pastor Mark Clark, great church and great book there. Check out the website, theproblemofjesus.com. Mark, got to go to a break. We would love to talk to you in about 2 or 3 months and just catch up with you. Let's take a break.
It.
We'll be right back.
Thanks, guys.
And I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
This is